Do you believe in standing up for what's right? In a small town, Ms. Emma Sanders, a beloved teacher, was suspended for showing compassion to a sick student, Marcus Jenkins. Her only mistake? Sending Marcus to the nurse without a hall pass when he fell ill. But the real story was just beginning. The classroom fell silent as Ms. Emma Sanders stood before her students, her heart pounding as the school principal entered with a stern expression. It was a typical Tuesday morning, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the soft whispers of students who were supposed to be reading silently. Emma's eyes darted to the clock on the wall, noting it was only 10:30 a.m., far too early for any kind of visit from Mr. Thompson, the principal. Emma had always been the kind of teacher who went the extra mile for her students. Her classroom was a safe haven, adorned with colorful posters, a small library in the corner, and motivational quotes that inspired young minds to dream big. She had spent years fostering an environment where every student felt seen and heard, and she prided herself on knowing each child's unique needs and challenges. "Ms. Sanders," Mr. Thompson began, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "May I have a word with you?" "Of course," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She motioned for the students to continue their reading before stepping out into the hallway. Mr. Thompson's expression was unreadable, his usual genial demeanor replaced by a cold, professional mask. Emma's mind raced with possibilities. Had something happened to one of her students? Was there a new policy she had missed? "Is everything all right?" she asked, her concern for her students overriding her own anxiety. "Ms. Sanders, I've received a report about an incident involving Marcus Jenkins," Mr. Thompson said, his tone indicating the seriousness of the matter. "It seems you sent him to the nurse without the proper hall pass." Emma's heart sank. She remembered the incident clearly. Marcus, a bright and lively boy, had been unusually quiet that morning. His face was pale, and he seemed to struggle to keep his eyes open. Emma had approached him during the independent reading time. "Marcus, are you feeling okay?" she had asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. He had looked up at her, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "I don't feel so good, Miss Sanders," he had whispered. That was all Emma needed to hear. She had quickly written a note and sent him to the nurse, not thinking twice about the strict hall pass rules. Marcus's health had seemed far more important in that moment. "I did," Emma admitted, meeting Mr. Thompson's gaze. "He looked very unwell, and I was concerned for his health." Mr. Thompson sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of bureaucratic procedures and regulations. "Miss Sanders, you know the rules. Every student must have a hall pass to leave the classroom, no exceptions. Your actions, while well-intentioned, were a direct violation of school policy." Emma felt a surge of frustration. "I understand the importance of rules, Mr. Thompson, but sometimes we need to prioritize the well-being of our students. Marcus was clearly ill. I couldn't just sit by and do nothing." Mr. Thompson's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Emma, your dedication to your students is admirable, but rules are in place for a reason. We can't have teachers making unilateral decisions that could undermine our procedures." Emma opened her mouth to protest further, but Mr. Thompson held up a hand to stop her. "I'm afraid this incident has serious consequences. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further investigation." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. "Suspended?" she echoed, disbelief and fear mingling in her voice. "But—" "I'm sorry, Ms. Sanders," Mr. Thompson said, his tone indicating the finality of his decision. "You'll need to leave the premises immediately." Emma stood there, numb and stunned. She glanced back at her classroom, where her students were oblivious to the turmoil unfolding just outside their door. With a heavy heart, she nodded and turned to gather her belongings. As she walked back into the classroom, the students looked up, sensing something was wrong. Emma forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Class, I need to step out for a while. Mr. Thompson will be here to supervise until a substitute arrives. Please continue with your reading." Whispers spread like wildfire among the students, but Emma couldn't bear to address their questions. She quickly gathered her personal items, fighting back tears. As she walked to the door, Marcus looked up from his desk, confusion and worry etched on his young face. "Ms. Sanders, are you leaving?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma paused, her heart breaking. "Just for a little while, Marcus. You take care, okay?" With that, she left the classroom, the door closing behind her with a finality that felt crushing. The news of Emma's suspension spread quickly through the school. Students and faculty alike were shocked and confused. Emma was beloved by her colleagues and students, known for her compassion and dedication. The idea that she had been suspended for helping a sick child seemed absurd and unjust. Outside the school, Emma stood by her car, taking deep breaths to steady herself. She knew she had done the right thing for Marcus, but the cost of that decision now seemed overwhelming. As she drove home, her mind raced with worries about her future, her students, and how she could possibly make things right. Meanwhile, inside the school, the impact of Emma's absence was immediate. Marcus's condition continued to deteriorate, and he was eventually sent home by the school nurse, who confirmed that he had a severe case of the flu. The other students were unsettled by the sudden change, their usual routine disrupted by the absence of their caring teacher. Parents began to hear about the incident, and soon, the community was buzzing with questions and concerns. How could a teacher be punished for helping a child in need? What kind of message did this send to the students about empathy and care? Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus's mother, was particularly outraged. She knew how much Emma had done for her son, and the thought of her being punished for showing kindness was unbearable. She decided to take action, reaching out to other parents and community members to organize a meeting. In the days that followed, the small town became a hive of activity. Parents, teachers, and students rallied together, determined to fight for Emma's reinstatement. They wrote letters, made phone calls, and prepared to attend the next school board meeting to voice their concerns. Emma, meanwhile, tried to stay hopeful. She received messages of support from her students and their families, each one a small beacon of light in the dark days of her suspension. She knew she had to stay strong, not just for herself, but for the students who looked up to her. As the date of the school board meeting approached, the tension in the community reached a boiling point. Everyone knew that the outcome of this meeting would have far-reaching implications, not just for Emma, but for the entire school. The night before the meeting, Emma sat at her kitchen table, going over her speech. She wanted to make sure she conveyed the importance of compassion and the need to sometimes bend the rules for the greater good. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battle ahead. Little did she know, the events of the next day would bring about a shocking turn of events that no one in the community could have anticipated. The story of Ms. Emma Sanders and Marcus Jenkins was far from over, and the lessons they would all learn were only just beginning. The days following Emma's suspension were a blur of confusion and frustration. Emma found herself pacing her small living room, the silence of her home a stark contrast to the lively chatter of her classroom. The phone rang constantly, calls from concerned parents, supportive colleagues, and even some of her students who had managed to get their hands on their parents' phones. She tried to stay positive, but each call was a reminder of the uncertainty she faced. Her thoughts constantly drifted back to Marcus, wondering how he was faring and if he understood why she wasn't there. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Emma's absence was palpable. Her students missed her gentle guidance, and the substitute teacher struggled to maintain the same level of engagement and discipline. Marcus, still recovering from the flu, returned to a classroom that felt strange and incomplete without Ms. Sanders. During recess, clusters of students gathered, their conversations inevitably circling back to the incident. "It's not fair," one student said, kicking at the dirt. "Ms. Sanders was just trying to help." "I know," another replied. "My mom said she's going to talk to the principal about it." In the teacher's lounge, the mood was somber. Ms. Claire Thompson, the fifth-grade teacher, sighed as she sipped her coffee. "I can't believe they suspended Emma for that. She's one of the best teachers we have." Mr. Ramirez, the PE teacher, nodded in agreement. It's ridiculous. If we can't act in the best interests of our students, what are we even doing here? The support for Emma began to grow beyond the school walls. Parents started to voice their concerns more openly. Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus's mother, was particularly vocal. She had always admired Emma's dedication to her students, and the thought of her being punished for showing kindness to her son was infuriating. One evening, Mrs. Jenkins hosted a gathering at her home, inviting other parents to discuss the situation. The small living room buzzed with conversation as parents shared their outrage and concern. "We need to do something," Mrs. Jenkins said, standing at the front of the room. "This isn't just about Ms. Sanders. It's about how our school handles situations like these. Our children deserve better." Several parents nodded in agreement. "What can we do?" one mother asked. "We start by demanding a meeting with the school board," Mrs. Jenkins replied, determination in her voice. "We need to make our voices heard. We can't let them sweep this under the rug." The group quickly organized a plan. They would gather signatures for a petition, write letters to the school board, and prepare to speak at the next board meeting. The community's response was overwhelming. Within days, they had hundreds of signatures and a stack of letters ready to be delivered. Back at home, Emma tried to stay busy, but the waiting was unbearable. Each day felt like an eternity. She missed her students terribly and worried about the impact her absence was having on them. The messages of support helped, but they also reminded her of the uncertainty of her situation. One afternoon, as she sat on her porch, Emma received a call from Claire Thompson. "Hey, Emma," Claire said, her voice warm and reassuring. "I just wanted to let you know that we're all behind you. The parents are organizing a meeting with the school board. They're not going to let this go." Emma felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Claire. That means a lot to me. I just hope it's enough to make a difference." "It will be," Claire assured her. "We'll make sure of it." Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling to adjust. He had always been a good student, but without Ms. Sanders, he felt lost. He missed her encouragement and the way she always seemed to know when he needed a little extra help. His mother noticed the change in him and decided to take matters into her own hands. One evening, as Marcus sat at the kitchen table trying to complete his homework, Mrs. Jenkins sat down beside him. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Marcus shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "I miss Ms. Sanders," he admitted. "I know you do," she said, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "But we're doing everything we can to bring her back. You just focus on getting better and doing your best, okay?" He nodded, but the sadness in his eyes was unmistakable. Mrs. Jenkins's resolve hardened. She knew they had to fight not just for Emma, but for all the students who depended on teachers like her. The night of the school board meeting arrived, and the auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, and even some students filled the seats, their faces a mix of determination and anticipation. Emma sat near the front, flanked by Claire and Mr. Ramirez, who had come to support her. The board members took their seats, and the room fell silent. The chairperson, Mrs. Whitaker, called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss the recent suspension of Ms. Emma Sanders," she began, her tone formal. "We will hear from members of the community before making any decisions." Mrs. Jenkins was the first to speak. She stood up, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "My name is Angela Jenkins, and my son, Marcus, is a student in Ms. Sanders' class. On the day of the incident, Marcus was very ill. Ms. Sanders acted out of concern for his health, and I believe she did the right thing." She paused, looking around the room. "As parents, we trust the school to care for our children. Punishing a teacher for showing compassion sends the wrong message. We need to support our teachers, not penalize them for doing their job." Her words were met with applause. One by one, other parents stood up to share their stories and express their support for Emma. Some spoke of the positive impact she had on their children, while others highlighted the importance of empathy in education. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she stood up, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and began. "I've always believed that teaching is about more than just imparting knowledge. It's about caring for our students and ensuring their well-being. On that day, I made a decision based on what I felt was best for Marcus. I understand the need for rules, but sometimes we have to prioritize the health and safety of our students." As she spoke, she saw nods of agreement from the audience. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for understanding. We need to create an environment where teachers feel supported in making the right decisions for their students." When she finished, the room erupted in applause once more. Emma sat down, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The decision now rested with the school board. After several more speakers, Mrs. Whitaker called for a recess. The board members huddled together, their expressions serious. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as everyone waited for the verdict. When the board finally reconvened, Mrs. Whitaker addressed the audience. "We have heard your concerns and appreciate the passion and dedication you have shown. We will take all of this into consideration as we make our decision. Please understand that this is a complex issue, and we need time to ensure we make the right choice for everyone involved." With that, the meeting was adjourned, and the crowd slowly dispersed. Emma left the auditorium feeling a glimmer of hope. The community had rallied behind her, and she knew that whatever the outcome, they had made a powerful statement about the importance of compassion and understanding in education. In the days following the school board meeting, the community's determination only grew stronger. The suspension of Ms. Emma Sanders had sparked something much bigger than anyone had anticipated, a movement to uncover and address deeper issues within the school system. The community group that had formed to support Emma now expanded their focus. Led by Mrs. Jenkins, they began to investigate the school's policies and past incidents, hoping to find patterns or systemic issues that needed to be addressed. One evening, the group gathered in the Jenkins living room, the air thick with a sense of purpose. Mrs. Jenkins stood at the front, holding a stack of documents she had collected from various parents and teachers. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Our goal tonight is to review these documents and see if we can find any recurring problems that need to be brought to light." Claire Thompson, Emma's colleague, leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "I've been teaching here for over a decade, and I've seen a lot of things that were swept under the rug. This is our chance to finally address them." The group began to sift through the papers, sharing stories and piecing together a troubling picture. There were accounts of other teachers being reprimanded for similar actions, helping students without following rigid protocols, or speaking out against unfair policies. Some documents highlighted issues of neglect when it came to students' health and safety, particularly affecting those from marginalized backgrounds. Emma, who had joined the group despite her suspension, felt a mix of sadness and determination as she listened. "I knew there were problems, but I didn't realize how deep they went," she said quietly. "We need to make sure no other teacher or student has to go through this." Mr. Ramirez, the PE teacher, spoke up. "We should compile a report with all our findings and present it to the school board. They need to understand that this isn't just about one incident, it's about a broken system." Everyone agreed, and they spent the next several hours organizing their findings into a comprehensive report. By the time they were finished, it was late, but they had a clear plan. They would request a special session with the school board to present their report and demand changes. As word spread about the group's efforts, more parents and teachers came forward with their own stories. The community's resolve strengthened, and the upcoming school board meeting became a beacon of hope for many. On the day of the meeting, the auditorium was filled to capacity. Emma sat near the front with her supporters, the report clutched tightly in her hands. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. This was their chance to make a real difference. Mrs. Whitaker, the school board chairperson, called the meeting to order. "We have received a request from the community to address ongoing concerns about school policies and practices. We will hear their report now." Mrs. Jenkins stood up, her hands steady as she held the report. "Thank you for allowing us this opportunity. Over the past few weeks, we have gathered testimonies and evidence that highlight serious issues within our school system. These issues not only affect our teachers but also put our students at risk. She began to read from the report, detailing incidents of neglect, unfair disciplinary actions, and systemic discrimination. Each story was a powerful reminder of the real human impact of these policies. As Mrs. Jenkins spoke, the room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Claire Thompson took the floor next. As teachers, we are on the front lines every day. We see firsthand the effects of these policies on our students. We are not here to point fingers, but to call for necessary changes that will benefit everyone. She paused, looking directly at the board members. We need more flexibility in how we care for our students. We need to trust our teachers to make the right decisions. And most importantly, we need to ensure that our policies do not disproportionately harm those who are already vulnerable. Mr. Ramirez followed, sharing his experiences and emphasizing the need for systemic change. The room remained focused and engaged, the collective desire for justice and improvement clear. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she stood up, feeling a wave of support from those around her. This experience has been incredibly difficult, but it has also shown me the strength of our community. We all want what's best for our students. That's why I became a teacher in the first place. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. I believe we can create a school environment where every student feels safe and supported, and where teachers are empowered to act in their best interests. But we need to work together to make that happen. After the presentations, the board members conferred amongst themselves, their faces serious. Finally, Mrs. Whitaker addressed the room. We have heard your concerns and acknowledge the issues you have raised. Effective immediately, we will form a committee to review and revise our policies, with input from teachers, parents, and students. The announcement was met with applause. It was a victory, but the group knew there was still much work to be done. They would hold the board accountable and ensure that real changes were made. In the following weeks, the committee was formed, and Emma was invited to be a part of it. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she could help shape a better future for her students and colleagues. Marcus's health improved, and he returned to school with a newfound confidence. His mother's efforts had shown him the power of standing up for what's right, and he was proud to have been a part of it. The school community began to heal and grow stronger, united by a shared goal of creating a safe, supportive environment for everyone. Emma's suspension was officially lifted, and she returned to her classroom, greeted by the smiling faces of her students. As she stood before them, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude. This experience had been a challenging journey, but it had also brought out the best in her community. Together, they had shown that change was possible, and that compassion and justice could prevail. The story of Emma Sanders and Marcus Jenkins had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of standing up for what is right, and a reminder that when a community comes together, they can achieve great things. The anticipation in the air was palpable as the community gathered for the special school board meeting. It was a warm evening, and the sun cast a golden glow over the crowd assembling in front of the school auditorium. Parents, teachers, students, and other community members filed into the building, their expressions a mix of hope and determination. Inside, the auditorium buzzed with quiet conversation. Emma Sanders sat in the front row, flanked by Mrs. Jenkins and Claire Thompson. Mr. Ramirez and several other teachers were scattered throughout the audience, showing their solidarity. The school board members took their seats at the front, their faces serious as they prepared for the proceedings. Mrs. Whitaker, the chairperson, called the meeting to order, her gavel echoing through the room. We are here to discuss the findings of the committee and to hear further comments from the community regarding recent events and proposed changes to our school policies. The first to speak was Mrs. Jenkins. She stood confidently, holding a carefully prepared statement. Good evening. My name is Angela Jenkins, and my son, Marcus, is a student at this school. We are here tonight to advocate for change, not just for the sake of it, but because it is necessary for the well-being of our children and the integrity of our educators. She continued, her voice steady and impassioned. The committee has worked tirelessly to review our school's policies, and we have identified several areas that need immediate attention. These include the rigid enforcement of hall passes, inadequate response to student health issues, and a lack of support for teachers making judgment calls in the best interests of their students. Mrs. Jenkins's words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement. She handed the floor over to Claire Thompson, who presented the detailed findings of the committee. Claire highlighted specific cases, including Emma's suspension, as examples of the detrimental effects of the current policies. "We need to trust our teachers," Claire said, her voice firm. "They are on the front lines, interacting with our children every day. They understand their needs and are often the first to notice when something is wrong. Penalizing them for taking initiative sends a dangerous message." As Claire spoke, Emma felt a surge of gratitude. Her colleagues and community were standing up for what was right, and it gave her hope that change was possible. Next, Mr. Ramirez took the floor. "I've seen firsthand how these policies impact our students, especially those who are already vulnerable. We need a system that prioritizes their well-being and supports our educators in making the right decisions. It's time for a change." The board members listened intently, their expressions ranging from thoughtful to concerned. Mrs. Whitaker called for a short recess to allow the board to discuss the presentations. As the board members huddled together, the audience buzzed with quiet anticipation. Emma felt a mix of hope and anxiety. This meeting was a crucial step, but she knew that real change would take time and continued effort. After a few minutes, Mrs. Whitaker reconvened the meeting. She addressed the room with a serious expression. "We have heard your concerns and appreciate the hard work of the committee. We agree that changes are necessary to ensure the well-being of our students and to support our teachers." She paused, glancing at her fellow board members. "Effective immediately, we will revise the hall pass policy to allow more discretion for teachers in urgent situations. We will also implement additional training for staff on how to handle student health emergencies and create a more supportive environment for our educators." The room erupted in applause. It was a significant victory, and the community's hard work had paid off. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. The changes weren't just about her, they were about creating a better, more compassionate environment for everyone. As the applause died down, Mrs. Whitaker continued. "We also recognize the importance of ongoing dialogue between the board, the teachers, and the community. To that end, we will establish a regular forum for these discussions to ensure that we continue to address any issues that arise." Emma looked around at the faces of her colleagues and the parents who had supported her. There was a sense of unity and shared purpose that was inspiring. They had come together to make a difference, and their efforts had been rewarded. After the meeting, the crowd spilled out into the warm evening air, their conversations filled with relief and celebration. Emma was surrounded by well-wishers, each offering their congratulations and support. Mrs. Jenkins hugged her tightly. "We did it, Emma. We made a difference." Emma smiled, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Angela. I couldn't have done it without you and everyone else." Claire Thompson joined them, her expression one of pride and determination. "This is just the beginning. We need to keep pushing for more changes, but tonight was a big step." Mr. Ramirez nodded in agreement. "We've shown that we can make a difference when we come together. Let's keep this momentum going." As the crowd began to disperse, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them with the support of her community. The next day, Emma returned to her classroom. The students greeted her with cheers and hugs, their faces beaming with happiness. Marcus, now fully recovered, ran up to her and gave her a big hug. "Miss Sanders, I'm so glad you're back," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with gratitude. Emma knelt down to his level, her heart full. "I'm glad to be back, Marcus. And I'm so proud of all of you for standing up for what's right." The classroom buzzed with excitement as the students settled into their seats. Emma looked around at their eager faces and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that they had all learned an important lesson, not just about the power of standing up for what's right, but about the strength of community and the importance of compassion. As the days turned into weeks, the changes in the school began to take effect. Teachers felt more empowered to make decisions in the best interests of their students, and the school became a more supportive and nurturing environment. Emma continued to work with the committee, ensuring that the new policies were implemented effectively and advocating for further improvements. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper connection to her community. The story of Emma Sanders and Marcus Jenkins had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that when people come together for a common cause, they can create lasting change. And as Emma looked out at her classroom each day, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, making a difference, one student at a time. The school year drew to a close, and with it came a sense of accomplishment and renewed hope. Emma Sanders walked through the hallways of her school, the walls lined with colorful student artwork and posters announcing end-of-year events. The atmosphere was alive with the buzz of excitement and anticipation for summer break. Emma paused outside her classroom door, taking a moment to appreciate the journey that had brought her here. The challenges and triumphs, the support of her community, and the changes that had been made, all of it culminated in this moment. She pushed open the door and was greeted by the cheerful voices of her students. "Good morning, Miss Sanders," they chorused, their faces bright with smiles. "Good morning, everyone," Emma replied, her heart swelling with pride. "Today is a special day. We're going to reflect on everything we've learned this year and celebrate our achievements." The students settled into their seats, their eyes wide with curiosity. Emma began by reading a letter she had written to them, expressing her gratitude for their resilience and kindness. She spoke about the importance of standing up for what is right and the power of community. "Each one of you has shown incredible strength and compassion," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Remember that you have the power to make a difference, no matter how small your actions may seem." After her speech, the students took turns sharing their favorite memories from the year. Marcus was the last to speak. He stood up, his gaze steady as he looked around the room. "I want to thank Miss Sanders for everything she's done for us," Marcus began, his voice strong. "She taught me that it's okay to ask for help and that we should always look out for each other. Because of her, I know that I can be brave and stand up for what's right." The room fell silent, the weight of Marcus's words settling over them. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She knew that this moment was a testament to the impact of her efforts and the collective strength of her community. As the day continued, the students engaged in various activities designed to celebrate their growth and accomplishments. They played games, created art, and shared stories. The atmosphere was one of joy and camaraderie, a fitting end to a transformative year. In the afternoon, the school held an assembly to recognize outstanding achievements. The auditorium was filled with students, parents, and teachers, all eager to celebrate the successes of the past year. Mrs. Whitaker took the stage, her presence commanding attention. "Today, we honor those who have gone above and beyond," she began, her voice clear and confident. "This year, we faced many challenges, but we also witnessed incredible acts of courage and compassion. One person, in particular, has exemplified these qualities and has made a lasting impact on our school." Mrs. Whitaker's gaze settled on Emma, who sat in the front row, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Ms. Emma Sanders, please join me on stage." Emma rose to her feet, the applause of the audience ringing in her ears. As she walked to the stage, she felt a mixture of humility and pride. Standing beside Mrs. Whitaker, she faced the crowd, her eyes scanning the sea of supportive faces. "Ms. Sanders, your dedication to your students and your unwavering commitment to doing what is right have inspired us all," Mrs. Whitaker said, her voice warm with admiration. "It is my honor to present you with this award for outstanding service and exemplary teaching." Emma accepted the award, her hands trembling with emotion. She took a deep breath and turned to the microphone. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "This award is not just for me. It belongs to everyone who stood by me, who believed in the power of kindness and community. Together, we have shown that we can create a better future for our children." The audience erupted in applause, the sound a testament to the collective effort and unity that had brought them to this moment. As Emma returned to her seat, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for the new school year. The changes implemented by the committee had already begun to make a difference. Teachers felt more empowered, students were more engaged, and the overall atmosphere of the school was one of support and collaboration. Emma continued to work closely with the committee, ensuring that the new policies were effective and that the lines of communication remained open. She knew that there was still work to be done, but she was confident in the direction they were heading. On the last day of school, Emma's classroom was filled with laughter and farewells. She handed each student a personalized note, expressing her pride in their achievements and her hopes for their future. Marcus lingered behind as the other students filed out, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything, Ms. Sanders," he said, his voice sincere. "You've made a big difference in my life." Emma knelt down to his level, her eyes meeting his. "And you've made a big difference in mine, Marcus. Never forget how strong and capable you are." As Marcus left, Emma stood in the empty classroom, reflecting on the year. It had been a journey of growth, not just for her students, but for herself as well. She had learned the power of community, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the profound impact of compassion and empathy. The school year had ended, but the story of Emma Sanders and Marcus Jenkins continued. It was a story of resilience, of coming together in the face of adversity, and of creating a brighter future for all. Emma knew that the lessons they had learned would stay with them, guiding them as they moved forward. As she walked out of the classroom, the sun setting on another chapter of her life, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. She was exactly where she was meant to be, making a difference, one student at a time. And with the support of her community, she knew that anything was possible.